Hey everyone, Happy New Year and welcome back to Behind the Mask. I'm one of your co-hosts EJ, and Lori
Hello.
is joining me today. Unfortunately, T was unable to be here, but she'll be back in upcoming episodes. So today is episode 15 and we'll be chatting about the masks of names. Just a friendly reminder that anything we discuss in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or medical professionals, or even, since we're talking about names, legal advice as well. So,
Good call.
so I think we're going to start just kind of like in general nicknames because, like, Lori and I both have them. Some are cool, some are not so cool. You guys, as listeners, mostly probably know me as EJ. I actually, my legal name is Aaron. So the E in EJ is obviously Aaron. And I use, the J from my middle name. And I've always used EJ online. Like, I've never used Aaron. So there are a few groups that do know me as Aaron because of, like, I won a project a couple years ago. Gosh, it was probably 6 or 8 years ago. And so some of them have been kept calling me Aaron when they found out what EJ stood for. And I don't mind that, like I'm like, okay, I know you long enough. It's okay. And when I first started going online in the late 90s, my mom was terrified that I was going to get like scooped up by some strange guy. And so she was terrified of me being online. And so I was like, that made me just like, well, I'll just go by EJ online and then nobody will know what the E and the J stand for unless I tell them. And, we didn't have like the social media like we did back in the 90s, what like we have now, we didn't have back in the 90s. So it was basically just email and chat rooms. Yes, chat rooms, a room where you go and talk to people.
Oh my goodness. Those don't even exist anymore, right?
No, not in the way I used to do them. And, so I love my nickname. I think my parents at one time tried to get me to go by EJ, and I wasn't really feeling it, but I was like in elementary school and like everybody knew me as Aaron, and I didn't really, I didn't figure anybody would really change. But then I can't remember, a friend's dad maybe mentioned it, and one of my best friends, well, I had two best friends growing up, both named Aaron, same spelling as me, and it started getting easier. So I think one of their parents started calling me EJ just to keep the difference. And then just as I grew up, EJ started growing on me more. And now it's weird because at church, I've always introduced myself as Aaron. And then I have to add in, but I go by EJ on Facebook. Because a lot of people at church who I might not see too much only maybe interact with me online. So they see me as EJ on our Facebook group or on our Instagram or something. So they're like, well, which one do you prefer? And I'm like, honestly, I don't have a preference. I like both equally. I love Aaron as like a family name. All my family calls me that. And then I consider the people I go to church with my family. So I'm like, you're welcome to call me that. And, if you're used to calling me EJ because that's what you used to seeing me as, then call me EJ. I don't have a preference either way.
Interesting. Yeah. I know, being friends, somebody will say to me, I'll be talking about you, because I refer to you as Aaron because that's how I first met you. And was through church. And so I remember the first time somebody asked me about EJ, and it wasn't, I don't know, it just didn't occur to me. And I was like, who? Oh, wait.
You mean,
oh, Aaron. Yes, right. yes. We're friends. We know one another. Yeah. I didn't make that connection. Right. But it reminded me of a time, I did, and I know we're going to go into some of that later. When I was first online, I had a lot of reasons why I changed my name. And but I'd kind of forgotten that I did that. And I'd never actually run into people that I'd only met online until my oldest graduated from boot camp. So we're down in San Diego, and everywhere I go, everyone keeps calling me, you know. And it was funny because they didn't really know how to say it. So I would get called Leah or Lay, or, you know, because my middle name is Lee, and I went by that on social media platforms, especially on Facebook. And so here I am around all of these military families, and everyone kept calling me, you know, this Lee, Lay, you know, and half the time I wasn't responding, and then I get a tap on the shoulder. Lee, don't you remember me? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's right. They're all calling me by that. That's what I am on Facebook, you know.
Yeah.
So I really didn't even, and you know, by the time we got through the end of the weekend, I was better with it. But I just hadn't even ever thought about physically meeting people that I'd met online, and it definitely is a way that I know that people know me online, or at least currently right now. I'm getting ready to make some changes with that, so we'll see what happens. But you know, it's just a different thing. And then I was thinking, you know, as we were kind of talking about this, you know, nicknames, and the good ones, the bad ones, the ugly ones, you know. You didn't grow up with siblings, but siblings always have ridiculous pet names, nicknames, you know, teasing. Oh my gosh, I've been called Honeycomb Nose and Squinley Bo Diddley, and oh my gold, Old Yeller. I think it's why I didn't like dogs for the longest time. I didn't like being called after an old dog, you know. You know, there were just different things. And then there were the fun ones. You know, there was Gidget, which was a favorite character of mine. I'm really dating myself now. And you know, I loved Gidget because, you know, it was fun, and it felt, she was like that girl I wanted to be, you know, the little surfer girl. And so I definitely enjoyed that one. I had one which will remain nameless in high school. I'll share the story, and you can just guess what the nickname would be. I'm not even going to say it out loud. But a friend of mine and I were in a science class, and science is, if you know me, was not my strong suit.
Oh God.
I'm a English, history, theater, even poli-sci, you know, other things, but not science and not math. Oh, those are complete foreign languages to me. So I'm in this, physical earth science class, which of course is like, in high school, it's like, please don't take this wrong, but you know, it's the class for the jocks that are just trying to maintain their grade point average so they can play. You know, there were literally, I think there were 3 of us girls in that class, and then the rest was football, wrestling, basketball, you know, all these athletes in there. And so it was a crazy class. And so one day we were doing an experiment, and one of the guys decided to throw water on me in my white t-shirt back in high school, you know, playing games. And of course, you know, my body reacts to the ridiculously cold water thrown on my white t-shirt, and I got a nickname. And he would yell that nickname across the quad, across the like hallways, and oh my gosh, it was so embarrassing. And he was the only one who ever used it. It was just this thing. We really were friends. Well, good acquaintances, we'll say that. You know, it wasn't like we were enemies or anything. He just was that typical boy that loved to tease, and that's how he chose to do it. And so I got that ridiculous nickname, which shall remain unsaid for now. But yeah, it was just that one where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And he would yell it everywhere.
Right.
And it was very embarrassing. But yeah, I'm so glad I'm not back in high school.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and obviously we're talking the good, the bad, and the ugly too. So, obviously I've been overweight all my life. So, a lot of the young kids would call me Shamu. And now I joke, I'm like, well, if I just wear a white and black t-shirt, I'm just, just call me Shamu. And I joke about it because I'm comfortable and I know that, but at 6 to 12 years old, that was a tough name to hear. Not many
That's
people
horrible.
did. Most kids were pretty good about it. And there were actually, surprisingly, the kids that teased me the most about being overweight were the kids that were a little chunky themselves. And it was like, because they heard it about themselves, like they figured it would just be easier. And, and so then there was another one, I think in high school, Thunder Thighs was another one. And I'm like, seriously, guys? And it was funny because the people I had in most of my classes didn't treat me like that because they either knew me. I was friends with everybody, like the jocks, the cheerleaders, the geeks, and so I'm like, and it didn't faze me. And I think that might be why a lot of people didn't tease me, is because I didn't react the way they expected me to when they called me that name.
That's a good, yeah. Okay.
And then, and of course, like at home, my mom would call me, or my mom, we had a family friend, and she'd call me Little Fred because my last name's Fredrickson. And so I was the youngest of all of them. So she'd call me Little Fred.
Oh, that's adorable.
And then, and sometimes my mom would call me that, let's go Fred, or like if we were going shopping, she'd tease, like, especially as I got my driver's license, she'd say things like, to the car, James, and just as a joke, because once I started learning how to drive, I wanted to be the one driving everywhere, so then she would just be the passenger. And
I have secretly always wanted to have a chauffeur and to be able to say, home, James. I would like that. That's a secret desire that I've always had.
And I'll confess, I gave my mom one. So my mom, all my life, like, I don't know, we're not really sure how it happened, but she had like an issue with her bronchial tubes. So from like October to like April, she would cough. And it was like a bronchitis. But she'd go to the doctor when it would get really bad, and they'd just basically give her some more a Z-Pak, which is, what they often give for bronchitis, and it would help. But the coughing would literally last like all through fall, winter, and most of the spring. And so, no kidding, I could be 4 aisles away in the store, and I could hear her coughing. And I'd know where she was, So I would tease her about being barky. And she didn't, she didn't mind it. She's like, okay, you can stop that. I'm like, well, I was like, I can't help it.
Sounds like one of the 7 dwarfs.
Right. And then my dad's little sister often called him Curdy, because his name was Curtis, so she'd call him Curdy. And I was like, okay. I guess I didn't understand it. Like, I don't know, it seemed like it was like a little brother type of thing. So she always like, well, he's my littlest brother, as in like he's the closest to her in age.
Right.
So I love you, Auntie. I don't think Dad was thrilled with the nickname, but he was like, he didn't really say much about it as far as I know. And I think,
oh, that's interesting. That reminds me of a family reunion event I went to.
Gosh.
Like, oh my gosh, this is years ago with my first husband. And I went to this huge family event, and his name was James. And so I just didn't even, like, it never occurred to me. But his little nickname was Jamie.
Yep.
And I was like, everyone kept talking about Jamie. And I'm like, we're in, I don't know, high school dating, and I'm like, who is Jamie?
Right.
And then I realized, oh, that's my boyfriend.
Right.
Oh my goodness gracious. I never let him live that one down. Yeah, that was just too cute. If I wanted to irritate him, which I didn't really most of the time, but every now and then I just get this little thing I'd throw out his nickname and he'd be like, "Seriously? Really? We're going there?" I'm like, "Sorry. It just came out." Yeah, he didn't like that one. I mean, it was yeah, that annoyingly adoring family nickname, that the person who gets stuck with it never likes it. Well, so okay, so we've talked about the good, bad, ugly of nicknames, right? But what are some of the maybe professional reasons why we would have different names? So let's think actors, authors, wow, doctors, I thought about, yeah, public figures of any kind, professional reasons why we would have a different name. And this was kind of fun to look up some different things, but do you have anything you want to start with, EJ?
Well, yeah, I was thinking just in general, like, okay, so authors, I've heard stories, being an author, writer myself, back, a couple hundred years ago, there were women writing under male pseudonyms or vice
Right,
versa.
right,
Because it wasn't they expected a woman to write a romance novel, but a woman couldn't write like a science fiction novel, or she couldn't write she could, but it wouldn't be taken as popular as if it was written by a man. So a lot of women would make a pseudonym of their pen name of a male pen name to write, or use initials. Like a couple I was thinking of, like C.S. Lewis.
yes,
He has pen names: Clive Hamilton, N.W. Clerk.
yep,
Those are more like gender neutral, depending on this, where you're at. Agatha Christie, I know, has written under Mary Westmacott, and a lot of these are just chosen because it's a family thing, or your name gets well known in a certain genre. You don't want to just go into a completely different genre with the same name.
right. I was
Because
reading that Stephen King even did that because he wanted to write more,
right.
and there was this concern, I guess, by his publisher that if he wrote too many books in a year, be oversaturating the market, and so he wanted to do more writing, and he came
Right.
up with this other name. J.K. Rowling
Yeah.
did that as well. And she too was one of those women, even today, who
Right.
chose a kind of more gender neutral initials
Yeah.
so that it wasn't so much about a woman author, male author.
Right. And Nora
Yeah,
Roberts, the same thing. She's a very well-known romance author.
right.
And she now has a pen name of J.D. Robb because she wanted to write mystery. But they didn't think that her, going under Nora Roberts, that people would like her writing mystery. So she went to more of a gender neutral with the J.D. Robb,
Right.
because it's, then she can publish mystery under that.
And then there's some authors who didn't choose to do that. So
Right.
I was just joking about this. So every year, I raised my sons to be able to know who they're buying their gift for, and both my boys observed long ago that I have some favorite authors. And so often for my Christmas Eve gift, I would get a book from one of my favorite authors. And one of my favorite female authors is a woman, Iris Johansson. And the boys had no idea. I mean, they're young when they're buying me these books, right? And I honestly, I guess I didn't know that she had been a different style of writer previously before she became this, because in my opinion, she's a female version of like a James Patterson in her style of writing. And I really, really, really like her. And so, I only knew her in the genre of like politics, crime, all that kind of stuff. And so She's got this great character that's a forensic psychologist. And as a matter of fact, I think the Bones show is based upon her character in her books. But anyway, so I'm getting this gift, and it's got the right name on the book, right? And it had this very, very sumptuous cover to it, you know. It wasn't, there weren't guys and girls on it, so you wouldn't have known, you know what I mean? But apparently, so I open up the book and I start reading, and I'm like, this is not like anything I've ever read by her.
Right.
And I'm reading it and I'm like, this is a romance book. This is it was a historical fiction, a historical romance. That's it. That's right. And it was good, but it just,
right. So
I
you
don't
experienced the other end of it where you
right, where they
literally
didn't
like,
change the name, and she yet changed her genre. And so it really threw me for a loop. I never told the boys until they were adults, because I think they would have died if they'd known they bought their mom, you know, some historical romance book. But anyway, it was just funny. Yeah, I experienced it in the other way, where they decided not to change their name, change their style of writing and all of this. And she doesn't write those anymore, but so she just kind of moved on. But anyway, yeah, so that was a fun experience.
Yeah. So, you know, that's
me.
cool that, you know, that you've had the other end of it. And, you know, like we know of like J.K. Rowling is a famous author. She did, like you said, kind of go to a more, she kind of shifted her name to write a different genre.
Yep.
And, you know, and even thinking back, you can probably talk more about this. I just know like Benjamin Franklin wrote to one of the newspapers as Mrs. Silence Dogood.
Yes.
You know, as just, I don't know the context of the letters per se, but I just remember like even that, like Benjamin Franklin wasn't, like nobody was willing to publish him, so he chose to like write to this newspaper under this old widow's like a name. And they and you know, back then in the like the 1700s, they didn't have like, you know, ways to verify who was writing it.
They didn't. You know,
So
it's interesting because I was just thinking it's really interesting, EJ, that even today, like we're definitely more modern, and we're definitely trying to erase some of those gender bias things. Like women write these types of novels and men write these types of novels, and you know, or your older generation does this, or your younger generation only does this. But a lot of that back then, the only way to get out what you wanted to say, if it were something that would not be considered a manly thing or a female thing or a young thing or an elderly thing, was to come up with a different moniker, a different name. And you had, and you really, the only way to do it was to totally keep it secret.
Right.
Because the moment that it got out, then all bets were off, and you know, you might not get to keep writing or keep your position, or you know what I mean. And you can actually get in different communities and societies, you could get in some pretty big hot water, if you will. And it could really affect your whole life. So especially somebody like Ben writing, you know, such a famous man writing under a widow's female name like that, you know. But it also had to do, even back then, kind of some history. A lot of that was done for spy purposes and for war and sending secret messages, and you know, it's just kind of a cool thing. So there's all kinds of reasons, but a majority of them were because the culture didn't permit for a man or a woman or an elderly or a junior to write in anything that wouldn't be considered exactly in their genre.
Right. And okay, so we've talked a lot about authors because, you know, we both have our writers, and you know, and but
we're both good readers.
But you know, this you know, expands to like, you know, political leaders, to public figures, period. Actors. There's a lot of actors. Some of them choose to go by a stage name because their last name may be very hard to pronounce or spell, and they want to go with something simple. Some prefer to, like, their legal name, they might be going as a celebrity, they might be known by their middle name. Like, honestly, I didn't know this until just doing some research, but Meghan Markle, who is the Duchess of Sussex, her legal first name is actually Rachel.
Right, right.
And I didn't know that, but she grew up being known as Meghan. So she was growing up, and so her stage name was Meghan Markle. And then when she married Prince Harry, she's now known as Duchess of Sussex Meghan. You know, so that was a chosen. And then the royal family. Does anybody actually know the last name? But of the royal family, they have one. You just don't know it.
Right.
They go by Prince Harry, Prince William, the Queen.
Right, right. It's kind of interesting.
I think it's Mountbatten, Windsor is the family.
Yeah, those are the two. Yeah.
So,
it's interesting. So, speaking of actors, so you definitely stage names. Stage names open doors, right? Norma Jean, one of the most popular, famously known now, of course, as Marilyn Monroe. But Marilyn was a female. Marilyn was given by the executive producer or whatever. He said she reminded him of a old starlet, and then Monroe was an old family name on, I can't remember which side of her family or whatever, but she wanted to go by that instead of Norma Jean or her other last name. Why can't I remember it now? But anyway, it just wasn't conducive to a public name at the time. Also, a huge reason. What if you have a really common name? This has been one of the most,
like John Smith.
Right. Yes. John Smith. Is John Smith going to stand out? No, there's a few thousands of them. Right. So we, especially nowadays, we want to be easily discoverable. Though I did find it interesting, like they brought up, if you can get in with, like, if you're an author or an actor, if you can get in with an agency or a major book publisher, you can still be successful having the name Dan Brown. You know, he's this huge, right? Dan Brown. Like, how common is that?
Yeah, and I love his books.
Right?
But as you said earlier, if I read a Dan Brown book and it turned out to be a romance, it would come off differently.
Yes.
Because I would be expecting something different, because I'm used to him reading that mysterious, got some deep stuff. Like his Digital Fortress book was really good. The Angels and Demons, Da Vinci Code books are amazing. But if he but if he tried to publish a romance book or a different style of book, it would be taken differently.
Right? Just because, who's Dan Brown?
Well, no, I would know who he is, but it would be unexpected,
Well, and also, I think, too, there's a difference between doing it yourself, self-publishing, versus he had Random House behind him.
Right.
So if Random House says Dan Brown's good and we're going to put the book out, people are going to read it, right? They're going to at least give it a chance.
Right. Well, and I think there is fear, with certain names. Like, my last name is constantly spelled wrong because it's Fredrickson, which is a very common name, but it's spelled differently.
Right.
And so I was like, well, I am going to publish under E.J. Fredrickson. And so I'm like, I really struggled for a while. Am I going to use this? But I'm like, no, because one, it's original. Two, not many people have my spelling.
Right.
And, there's plenty of people, like, you got to do your research for one, go online. And if you are an actor, if you are a writer and you want to be a certain name, search your name online and see if there's results. If you find there's 50 other people going by that name in some way, probably might want to change it.
Might want to reconsider.
Or go with family names, because I know a lot of people will go like if I said who Mark Sinclair Vincent was, you'd be like, who?
Right.
But then if I said Vin Diesel,
right,
that's Vin Diesel. His real name is Mark Sinclair Vincent. But
I love it.
Vincent, the Vin came from his last name, Vincent.
Yep.
And so he goes by Vin. And he said as a kid, he was always had so much energy. So a lot of his friends called him Diesel. So when he came up with stage name, that's what he came up with.
That's cool. I love it. I love hearing all these cool, fun little stories.
Yeah, and everybody's going to have their own story, and you just got to own it. You know, like, yeah, this is what I chose to do. And some chose to change their whole name completely.
Right.
Some choose to just change a last name or a first name. Some go by a middle name. Some go by a family name. There's actors and actresses that only go by one name.
Right.
Or like Lady Gaga.
Yes. Right.
Or
obviously not
Shakira.
What was the other? Also they choose things like Alicia Keys, right? So keys being keyboard and
Piano.
music, and I saw one, somebody I don't know really well, but the Weekend or whatever. Yeah, that's obviously not his real name,
right?
But
I thought that was a group.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one guy.
Yeah. Yep.
It's so interesting, for the reasons that they choose these things.
Right. And there's more common, I wouldn't say common sense reasons, but okay. So two people going through like medical school, couple, they end up getting together, but they don't get married until after both of them are well-established doctors.
Right.
So are you
can have two Dr. Smiths in the same office.
Right. But a lot of times women will choose to not take their husband's name in that way professionally. Like legally, they may be known as their husband's last name, but professionally, they may keep their professional name.
Well, yes. So I think that leads us right into the next kind of little change up. So why would we have, choose different names? So we're thinking safety purposes, divorces, marriages, or opportunities in life. So yes, we would definitely, if each is known, like I think Catherine Zeta-Jones didn't change her name to Douglas when she married Michael Douglas.
Right.
Because they were both so huge names in their own right. Nobody's changing anything,
Well, she might have legally, but not professionally, like to the world.
Not professionally to the world, right?
And
Nicole
that's what I
Kidman,
mean.
Tom Cruise,
And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get thrown for a loop when and some do, like Donnie Wahlberg of New Kids on the Block married Jenny McCarthy. Both of them were very well established prior to getting married, and legally she's Jenny McCarthy Wahlberg, but professionally she's still well known as Jenny McCarthy. I think she's now starting to use the Wahlberg a little bit, but
interesting. Yeah. So for financial purposes, right? For legal purposes, definitely for celebrity status. I know, okay, again, I'm going to date myself because I'm older. So, back in the day, God, I hate that phrase. But, it was very rare for a female to not take on the name of her husband, spouse,
right.
It was very traditional, and it was just something that was done and had been done for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But now in this, where we have a lot more feminists and just modern movement, if you will, and just this desire to still hold on to, I don't know, one's individuality or a sense of self, we're seeing a lot more hyphenated or not changing names. I've even seen, I was just recently at a wedding where the couple actually decided to come up with a new last name together.
Yeah. I know a celebrity couple that did that.
The father of the groom was not a happy camper. And he was really upset about it. And, but this was something the couple decided they wanted to do.
Yeah.
I was surprised. Like, I didn't find it harmful or disappointing or anything. Of course, it wasn't my children, but I don't think if either one of my boys came to me and said, Mom, I don't know, my youngest is engaged, right? So what happens when he gets married? If he comes to me and says, well, we've decided to come up with this last name. I think I'd be like, okay,
all right,
whatever flips your cookie.
Yeah.
I'm not totally
I know a younger
attached to it.
I know a younger actor couple that did that.
And Carlos, what was their reasoning?
So Carlos Pena and Alexa Vega were both actresses,
right,
in the mid 2000s. Kind of later. Yep. They're like 10 years younger than me, so that's, oh no, yeah. And so now they're both Pena Vega, because they both had super short last names, so they just combined them when they got married.
Okay.
And now they're known both as that, Carlos and Alexa Pena Vega, instead of being one or the other, which I think is kind of cool because it combined both their short last names. For me, like, I think in the future, if I do get married, I may hyphenate my middle, since it's super short, to my last name, my maiden name, and then take my husband's last name as my last name.
There you go.
That way I don't lose the Fredrickson, which is very important to me because it's my family name. It's my dad's last name. And, but I still have that, and I can share, the last name with my husband. So that's, and that may change too, depending on my life stage, when I do it. And that's a lot of, that's another thing, like life stage is another reason why you do or don't change. And some women or some people who get married and change their name and then do choose to get divorced continue to go by the married name.
Right. Or they go back to their maiden name.
Or they go back to their maiden name.
Or they come up with something totally different.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what I'm in the process of doing.
Yeah.
So, it'll be public soon enough. So here we go. But, I'm changing my name for many reasons. So I said we'd go back to this earlier, but, I'm a domestic violence victim. And so online and social media, part of the reason I didn't put my name, as in my traditional name, on social media was I wanted to make it more difficult to find me. Right. I did, of course, put all the safeguards in place. And for the longest time, I really didn't post pictures, and I didn't, there were so many reasons not to do that. You do have to be safe. So so safety reasons are a huge reason why some people choose to do that. I just couldn't feel safe just sticking myself plainly out there.
Right, and which makes sense, especially nowadays with the way you just type somebody's name into Google and you can find just about everything.
Right? Pay what, $10, $20, and you can even get background checks and all kinds of stuff. I don't know. I've never done that, but I don't know how reliable all that stuff is. But anyway, you can pretty much check anybody out and find them. Which is why for the first 3 years when my sons and I were here, I didn't have bank accounts. We didn't have anything in our names. Everything was through family and friends, and because we wanted to stay off the grid, if you will, right, just for that safety factor when we were first here. Now we're long since removed, and again, I don't run around exclaiming who I am and whatever. And we've even we've talked about going on to YouTube and what that might look like. And oh my gosh, I actually do a video of myself. I honestly there's still some fear there. There's still just, that hesitancy on my part to stick my face out there. I think I'm getting closer and closer to just being like, whatever, okay, I'm moving on with my life. And, as I've shared in the podcast, I'm engaged in a lot of counseling and psychology and, just working on all of these things. Unfortunately, I have a lot of trauma and a lot of triggers and a lot of things. And so I have to work through all these things as I do. And that's, kind of why I wanted to start this podcast, is it was part of that very therapeutic. This is me saying, okay, who am I? Am I valued? Does it matter what my name is? Does it matter that people can see me? How am I feeling? So I'm working through all these things, and I'm so glad to be doing it with some of my best friends, and just kind of sharing that experience. I've always, heard that if so and so can go through it, then so can I. If they can make it, then I can do it. And we all have stories to tell. Yes, it is a lot easier said than done.
And you're sharing that about because of your past with the domestic violence, but also, adoptions as a big, and, you can experience that too. And I was thinking about people who, like, when they were adopted, they had a different last name because they had the last name of the parents who maybe abandoned them or passed away, and then they're adopted. Do they keep the name that they were given at birth, or do they take the name of the new family? What does that look like? And it's different for every family and it's different for every person. Because some unfortunately don't get adopted.
Right.
And they, graduate high school and they're, turn 18 and they're out, and they make their own name. So do they keep the name that, they were, given at birth, or do they change it? And we didn't talk too much about this. And I do want to say, there's other, I know someone recently who has transitioned from female to male.
Right.
And so they have now a dead name of their female name from, that they were given at birth.
That's an interesting way to put it. A dead name?
To now
what's
their
the meaning behind
name.
That?
Yeah, so the dead name is a term that's been, I've heard. I'm not an expert in this, and I know that some in the trans community often will can reference their previous name as their dead name.
Interesting. Okay.
And their current name is the one that they choose to go by, and that's usually by a choice. Some keep it close to their previous name, some go completely different. The person that I know that did this is only a friend online, so I don't converse with them too frequently. It's just something I've seen kind of from a distance. But they chose to change their name. The female name that they had was a Jewish name that had a specific meaning, and so they went ahead and found a Jewish name in a male form that had the same meaning. So they kept the same meaning, but the name is slightly different.
I like it. Cool.
Just because, and they're very, Jewish, and they practice Judaism, so that was their choice, and they're living with it. So
very interesting.
It's not something I've experienced. That's not something I know much about, but I did want to at least say that there are other, I guess, opportunities and other times when name changes happen. And, nicknames are fun to have. And, some people may be known, like Vin Diesel. Like, Diesel was a nickname growing up, so he just chose to go by that as his last name for a stage name.
Right. Interesting.
And then
because T is not with us, I feel the need to bring in a kind of psychological counseling piece here. I've had different responses to me changing my name.
Right.
Some people are like, wow, that's cool, that's exciting. Other people are like, why would you do that? There are some people in my life who were very upset by it and not okay with it in any form or fashion. What I want to say, and again, as we always state in the beginning, we are not counselors. We are not, we're not to replace the professionals in your life. But what I think I can say with confidence is that whatever reasons you're choosing to do the things you're choosing to do them because they're your choice. Do them because it's something you want to do. And don't not make a decision even if everyone in your life isn't happy with whatever it is you're choosing to do. But especially with something as personal as your name, feel free to make choices and decisions and be yourself and love yourself and be confident that you're doing what's best for you. Now, I'm not saying ignore red flags. If you're a domestic violence victim, or God forbid well, they change your name anyway when you go into a witness protection program or whatever, but I'm not advocating to be dangerous or to be self-harming in any way for whatever reason you're doing it. So you do want to have people that can tell you, help you see some red flags. But if there aren't red flags associated with it, but it's something that you yearn to do and you want to do and you need to do, then I want to encourage you to do it. Be bold, make those choices, and that's what I'm learning how to do. For the longest time, I really have spent so much of my life totally consumed and concerned with what others think and feel, and will I be loved? Will I be this? Will I be that? And I'm thinking, gosh, it honestly consumes so much of me that I'm like, okay, I have to stop. I have to think, who did God create? What am I doing? Am I loving myself? Am I valuing myself? And not just about self. I mean, of course, my family is important, and my friends are important, and all of that. But I do have to stop. That's part of healthy boundaries and healthy, choices that we're making. So, anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there because T's not here to put her 2 cents in regarding that, and I know it's something she would have said. So,
yeah, no, you're right, and I think like for you, you're changing your name to something similar to what some people already know you as, so it's not going to be a big change for people.
No.
For others, it's going to be like this monumental change, but you have to remember, who are you doing the name change for, yourself or for somebody else? And you've got to remember to do it if you're making the conscious change and you're changing it because of, like Lori's experience of a domestic violence victim. She wants to, kind of pull away from that. It's time to, that's a big step. And I think
creating a new self.
Well, not really creating a new self, but identifying yourself.
Yes.
In the way you identifying.
Yes.
Which is why I brought up the trans community, because I think, I have so much to say about it, but I am not in that community, so I can't speak for them. But I know what I've seen is that a name change is a big deal, and it helps them identify with who they see themselves as. And in Lori's situation, she's choosing to change her name because the name she currently has for a long time has brought up triggers and
trauma and all that stuff.
Exactly. And so it's a safety thing. It's and some people choose to just let a nickname be the nickname that they stick with for the rest of their life. Names like Mike and Michael, or Robert can be, how many names can you get out of that? Bob, Bobby, Rob,
oh my gosh,
so
yes.
Some things like that, something as simple as just going by a nickname or a shortening of a last name or a first name or a middle name. Whereas some people take the step like Lori's doing and seeking legal counsel to pursue a legal name change and making it legal in the eyes of the government and the states. And that's a big step. And you had been offered it when you first got all the stuff dealt with, but you chose not to do it.
I wasn't ready yet.
you weren't ready. And so it took time, and it's taken, what, 15 years or
Yep.
so?
A little more than that, but yes.
So, you know, so that it's taken time. It's not something that you just change overnight.
Mm-mm.
And so
this has all been a huge process. Yeah.
So it's not taking a stage name and taking like a pen name is slightly different than taking a legal change, because it is a time, thing. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of prayer. The name you've now chosen is a name that's important to you. There's some biblical basis to some of the names you're going to be using. So
yep.
If those are the names that you connect with, then go for it.
Yeah.
And the rest of the people in your life are going to have to either support it or they're not going to. And so, unfortunately, you're going to have to contend with possibly losing people or having a different relationship with certain people because of that.
Right.
For me, it's like
kind of sad.
Right. And for me, it's like, I know what your first and last name is going to be now. And I'm like, well, that's what I've known you as since I've met you. So it's not going to be any change for me. But for some who've known you a lot longer, by your actual last name, I mean, and I know what your last name is. To me, it's like I never see it. So.
Because I barely use it unless I'm signing a check or something at the bank, or
which is weird legal. Too. You mentioned signing, and I was just thinking about this. I've been publishing journals online through Kindle Direct Publishing, and so I've been publishing under E.J. Fredrickson. And so I remember you had purchased one of the journals, and when you brought it, when you came to visit here a few weeks ago, you asked me to sign it, and I'm like, what am I going to sign things as?
Right.
I'm
That's
like,
a whole nother thing.
I'm like, because for me, I'm so used to legally signing my first and last name. And then I'm like, if I do my initials of EF, that's not going to make any sense, because where's the J? So then I kind of had to quick figure out how I was going to write it. I'm like, now I know what I'm going to do. But I was just like, wow. And that's a whole big piece too.
It's interesting that you said that, because I think psychologically I've wanted to do this name change for a while, because, when I sign things, I sign things L'Oreal, right?
Yeah.
And I just realized that I've been doing that for probably almost a decade now.
Yeah.
Because I got to this point in my life where I'm like, I don't want to put the last name, or I don't want to do that, or So for the longest time now, all my Christmas cards and letters and just different things and encouragement cards have been L'Oreal for a long time. So yeah, it's kind of cool that I just realized that I'd actually changed the way I signed things before I did it. So I kind of did it backwards.
But how many women who get married and know they're getting married and that like a few months start practicing their new last name?
Oh my gosh, I know you have to, because you'll go to sign something. I remember the first time I did that, or when somebody called me at a doctor's office, I was like, oh, that's me. Oh. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I'm really glad that we did this topic. So
and I think we'll probably go back to this in the future, and maybe you can talk about in the future what it's been like having legally done it, like once it's official. And
yes, it should be done sometime this year. So I'm kind of excited.
Yeah. And that right there is a legal process. You have to go through a judge.
Oh my goodness,
have to, go through a lot of paperwork, and you have to pay sometimes for it. And
then I'm going to have to get new social security cards and driver's license and all these things.
And then just like you were changing your name if you were getting married, I think some websites, if you go through like the Knot or some of those wedding websites where you just can make your own little website, they give you like a checklist afterwards to like change your name. Like,
right. It takes a lot.
Yeah.
You just don't even imagine how much it's connected to. That's how powerful our name is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we covered a lot, and again, I know we say this a lot in our outro, but if there's something you want to point out, or a thought or theory that we didn't come up with or didn't mention during this episode, feel free to message us and let us know, and maybe we can address that in our next one, because I'm sure a lot of these we will definitely do a part 2 or an update on, just a lot, because I think the world is ever changing.
Amen.
And there's all sorts of stuff going on out there. And another thing I just thought of is like a lot of people want like kids of celebrities. sometimes don't want to be known by their parents' last name or their parents' celebrity name. So they change their whole name just to, in the public eye, because they don't want to be in the shadow of their parents.
Yep. There's so many reasons for it.
So, just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or replacement for a conversation with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals, or legal advice. This episode is available on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as BehindTheMaskPC. And if you don't use social media, you can email us at BehindTheMaskPC@gmail.com. Feel free to review us on Anchor, leave feedback on the platform you listen to us on, or message us through our social media or email, because we'd love to hear what you think. You can find EJ on Twitter and Instagram as EJ8302. And if you'd like to keep these episodes coming, you can monetarily support us by visiting anchor.fm/BehindTheMaskPC/support. And on behalf of the ladies and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.